Off-duty guard visit colleagues, Royal King's Horse Guards. James wiped the sweat from his brow as he finished his morning patrol. The crisp air of the palace grounds carried a faint smell of dew and polished leather, the kind that clung to the horses and the guards' uniforms. Even though he was off duty today, he still felt the weight of the uniform's legacy, as if the royal history itself followed him wherever he went. The streets beyond the palace were beginning to wake up, but here, within the stone walls and cobbled paths of the barracks, time moved a little slower. The rhythmic sound of horse hooves on stone echoed softly, a gentle reminder of the regimented life he had chosen. James had been a royal horse guard for 5 years. Each morning, he had risen before the sun, brushed his uniform until it shone, and polished his boots until they reflected the world around him. To the outside world, the job might have seemed strict or ceremonial, but for James, it had always been more than a routine. It was a connection to something larger than himself, a living thread of history that stretched back hundreds of years. The armor he wore, the horses he rode, the marches he performed, all of it tied him to a tradition he could not explain but felt deep in his chest. Even off duty, James's mind wandered to the barracks. The camaraderie, the small jokes shared in the mess hall, the pride in each perfectly maintained bridle and saddle, it all called to him. Today, he decided, he would visit his colleagues. He wanted to see them not as a fellow guard on duty, but as a friend, and as part of the living story of the Royal Horse Guards. The thought made him smile quietly to himself as he walked down the familiar path, boots clicking against the cobblestones. The main courtyard of the barracks opened before him, bathed in the soft glow of the morning sun. Horses were being led out of their stables, their glossy coats catching the light. The young guards moved with careful precision, speaking softly to the animals, brushing them with gentle hands, adjusting the saddles just so. It was a dance James had watched many times, but today he was simply a visitor, a quiet observer in the midst of the ongoing ritual. The horses seemed to sense the calm in his presence, flicking their tails and nuzzling one another as if recognizing him as part of the extended family of the barracks. James's eyes were drawn to the stables first. The smell of hay and leather was comforting, grounding him. The sounds of the morning, soft whinnies, the occasional clatter of hooves, the distant call of a guard giving instructions, formed a symphony of everyday life in the barracks. He paused by a chestnut horse, running a hand along its silky mane. The animal shifted slightly, pressing its head into his hand as if offering a quiet greeting. "Morning, Arthur," he said softly, naming the horse as if it were an old friend. He had ridden Arthur many times during ceremonies, and the bond between horse and guard was subtle but powerful. The horse trusted him, and in return, he felt a calm certainty every time he was near him. As he walked further into the courtyard, he saw a few of his colleagues engaged in light conversation. Their laughter carried across the stone, breaking the formal silence that often surrounded them during duty hours. Seeing them relaxed like this warmed James's heart. In the quiet dignity of their uniforms, there was still room for friendship and humor, a reminder that behind the polished exterior were people who shared the same experiences, fears, and joys. He greeted them with a nod and a small wave, and they returned the gesture warmly, as if welcoming him into a secret corner of their world that few outside understood. One of the guards, a young man named Thomas, noticed him first. "James, didn't expect to see you today." "Off duty already," he called, his voice carrying across the courtyard. Thomas had joined the Horse Guards 2 years after James, but the two had quickly become close friends. Their bond had grown through long hours of training, shared meals, and quiet moments of reflection between parades and ceremonies. James grinned. "Yeah, thought I'd take a walk and check on you lot. See how life's treating the famous Royal Horse Guards when I'm not around." His tone was light, teasing, but beneath it was genuine curiosity. He wanted to know how his colleagues were faring, both in their work and in their personal lives. The connection between guards was more than professional, it was deeply personal. Every laugh, every shared story, every small gesture of help built trust that could not be broken, even in the face of the strictest discipline. Thomas laughed and clapped James on the shoulder. "Well, you're in luck. We're just about to start the morning drill with the horses. Care to join?" James shook his head with a smile. Today he wasn't here to train. He was here to observe, to reconnect. But he stayed nearby, watching as the younger guards moved with precision, adjusting saddles, leading horses through exercises, and checking their equipment with careful attention. Each movement spoke of discipline, of respect for the horses, and for the tradition they represented. James felt a swell of pride. These young guards were learning more than how to march or ride. They were learning to be part of a story that had lasted for centuries. He wandered toward the common room next, a cozy space where guards shared meals, read letters, and talked quietly in their downtime. The room was filled with the scent of fresh bread and polished wood, a warm contrast to the crisp air outside. James found a corner where he could sit without disturbing anyone, but soon enough, a few colleagues noticed him and waved him over. "Come on, James, sit with us," one of them called. Reluctantly, he moved over, smiling as they made room for him. Conversations flowed easily, jumping from recent parades to small jokes about uniform regulations to personal stories about family and hometowns. James listened, laughing at the right moments and nodding in understanding at the stories that carried a hint of struggle or challenge. A young recruit, barely out of his teens, spoke of his first day riding a ceremonial horse. His voice trembled with nervous excitement as he described how he had been terrified the horse would not obey his commands. James offered a few words of encouragement, sharing his own experiences from years ago. He recalled the first time he had mounted Arthur, how the horse had sensed his fear and how, slowly, trust had been built between them. The recruit's eyes lit up with understanding, and for a moment, James saw himself in the young man, eager, uncertain, and full of potential. That shared moment, small as it was, reminded him why he cherished the bonds formed in the Horse Guards. It wasn't just about discipline. It was about mentorship, patience, and mutual respect. The morning passed quietly, yet every moment was filled with subtle significance. James observed how the guards interacted with the horses, with each other, and with the small routines that defined their lives. He saw the pride in a polished boot, the focus in a careful brushstroke across a horse's coat, the gentle humor exchanged during a brief break. It all painted a picture of a life dedicated to something greater than oneself, a life that required sacrifice, discipline, and unwavering loyalty, but also offered deep fulfillment in return. As the sun climbed higher, casting warm light across the courtyard, James felt a sense of calm satisfaction. This visit, simple as it was, reminded him of why he had chosen this life in the first place. The uniform was not merely a piece of clothing. It was a symbol of history, responsibility, and connection. The horses were not just animals. They were partners, friends, and keepers of tradition. And the guards were not just colleagues. They were a family bound by shared experience and mutual respect. Being part of this world, even off-duty, gave James a sense of purpose that few other jobs could offer. Finally, as he prepared to leave the common room, he stood for a moment at the window, looking out over the courtyard. Horses moved gracefully beneath the morning sun. Young guards laughed quietly among themselves, and the stone walls of the barracks seemed to hum with stories of the past. James felt grateful for this quiet morning, for the chance to reconnect, and for the reminder that even off-duty, he was part of something timeless. He knew he would return to his daily life soon, but a piece of him would remain here, with the horses, the guards, and the history that they all carried together. With a final nod to his colleagues, James stepped out into the courtyard. The clatter of boots, the soft neighs of horses, and the warm smiles of his friends followed him as he walked away, each sound a small echo of the life he loved so deeply. The palace gates opened before him, leading back to the bustling streets beyond, but James carried the quiet dignity of the royal horse guards in his heart. He had come seeking a simple visit, but he left reminded of the legacy, the discipline, and the bonds that made this life extraordinary. James had spent the morning quietly observing the barracks, feeling the familiar comfort of routine and the warmth of camaraderie. But as the day progressed, he realized that the courtyard, while lively, was only one part of the life of the Royal Horse Guards. He decided to explore further, wanting to see not only the horses and drills but also the personal side of the guards, the stories that were rarely spoken aloud. The idea of learning more about his colleagues' experiences excited him. Even off duty, he found himself drawn into the rhythm of the barracks, as if the place itself were welcoming him back into its fold. He started with the stables. The morning sun had fully risen now, casting golden light across the rows of carefully maintained stalls. Horses of all shapes and colors moved gracefully within their pens, some pawing the ground impatiently for attention, others resting quietly, their large dark eyes calm and knowing. James had always loved the stables. There was something timeless about the smell of hay and the sound of hooves against stone that made the world outside the palace seem distant and trivial. As he walked between the stalls, he greeted each horse by name, some nudging him in response, others flicking their tails or shaking their heads playfully. It was an unspoken language, one that had developed over years of partnership and trust. "James, over here," a voice called. It was Henry, one of the more experienced guards, known for his gentle way with both horses and people. Henry was brushing down a dark bay horse, carefully running the brush along its muscular neck, making sure every stroke was precise. "Come, help me with this saddle. I want to see if you've forgotten your skills while off duty," he said with a grin. James laughed softly. "I'm not here to train today, Henry," he replied, "but I can watch and remember." Even so, he stepped closer, enjoying the familiar feel of the leather and the rhythmic motion of brushing a horse. Watching Henry work reminded him of the years he had spent learning the routines, the patient repetition that built expertise, and the quiet pride that came from a job well done. As he observed, James noticed a younger guard struggling with tying a saddle correctly. The boy's hands trembled slightly, betraying his nervousness. James's first instinct was to step in, but he hesitated, remembering his goal of observation. Still, he approached quietly, offering advice without taking over. "Try to keep your fingers steady and remember that the saddle needs to sit evenly on the horse's back," he said. The young guard nodded, following the instructions carefully. When the saddle finally clicked into place, relief and pride lit up the boy's face. "Thanks, James," he whispered. James smiled warmly. Moments like these, small as they seemed, were the essence of the horse guard's world: patience, mentorship, and shared knowledge. It wasn't just about performing duties perfectly. It was about growing together, learning from one another, and carrying the tradition forward. Once the saddles were secure and the horses calm, James wandered further into the barracks. The inner hallways were lined with polished wood and framed photographs of past parades, ceremonies, and distinguished guards. Each picture told a story, a frozen moment of pride and accomplishment. James paused at a photo of a grand parade from 10 years ago, recognizing a few familiar faces and remembering the energy and excitement of that day. Time moves fast, he thought, but the memories remain. It was humbling to see the legacy captured in photographs, knowing that each guard contributed to the ongoing story of the horse guards in his own way. In the mess hall, James found a group of guards sharing tea and bread, their conversation a gentle hum of voices. The atmosphere was warm, inviting, a place where stories were exchanged and friendships strengthened. James joined them, and immediately the conversation turned to recent events in the barracks. One guard spoke of a ceremony for a visiting dignitary, describing in detail the precise movements, the polished uniforms, and the disciplined horses. Another recounted a humorous mishap during a rehearsal, making the group laugh. The room was filled with light-hearted energy, and James felt a deep sense of belonging. It was a reminder that, while the role required discipline and respect, it also allowed space for joy, humor, and human connection. As the morning wore on, James decided to visit the training ground. Here, guards practiced their drills and maneuvers, often under the watchful eyes of senior officers. Today, the younger guards were performing basic riding exercises, learning to guide the horses through precise movements. James stood at the edge, watching intently. Each guard's posture, the gentle command given to the horse, the steady rhythm of the hooves, it all spoke of hours of training, dedication, and respect for both the animal and the tradition. Watching them, James remembered his early days as a recruit, feeling the same mixture of fear, excitement, and determination that these young guards now experienced. He could almost feel the heartbeat of the barracks itself, steady and unyielding, a pulse that connected every guard to those who had served before and would serve in the future. During a short break, James spoke with one of the senior guards, Richard, who had served for over 15 years. Richard's experience was evident in the calm authority he carried, in the way he moved and spoke. "You know, James," Richard said, "it's not just about the drills or the ceremonies. It's about how we carry ourselves, how we treat the horses, and how we support each other. That's what makes this regiment strong." James nodded thoughtfully, realizing how true those words were. The discipline and precision that outsiders admired were built on a foundation of trust, respect, and shared responsibility. Every interaction, every small act of guidance, and every quiet moment of reflection contributed to a culture that had endured for centuries. The young guards returned to their exercises, and James wandered closer to the horses again. He ran his hands along their coats, feeling the warmth and strength beneath his fingers. There was a unique bond between a guard and a horse, one built over countless hours of riding, caring, and mutual understanding. James recalled the first time he had ridden Arthur, the chestnut horse he had come to know so well. The initial fear had given way to trust, and now, even in quiet moments like this, he felt a connection that went beyond words. The horse seemed to sense his presence, flicking its ears and shifting its weight as if acknowledging him. It was moments like these that reminded James why he had chosen this life, a life of purpose, discipline, and deep, unspoken bonds. As the afternoon approached, James joined a small group for a casual walk around the palace grounds. The paths were lined with ancient trees, their leaves rustling gently in the breeze. The guards spoke quietly, sharing stories of past parades, lessons learned, and hopes for the future. James listened carefully, absorbing their experiences and occasionally adding his own reflections. There was a rhythm to these conversations, a flow that made time feel suspended. For James, it was both relaxing and invigorating, a reminder of the depth of connection that the Royal Horse Guards fostered among its members. Before he knew it, the day had progressed into late afternoon. James found a quiet bench overlooking the courtyard and paused to reflect on the morning. He thought about the young guard he had helped with the saddle, the laughter in the mess hall, the calm authority of Richard, and the trust shared with the horses. Each moment had been small, yet together they painted a picture of life in the barracks, discipline and friendship, tradition and growth, pride and humility. He realized that the Royal Horse Guards were not just a regiment. They were a living community, bound by shared experiences, mutual respect, and a commitment to something greater than themselves. As he prepared to leave the training ground, James felt a sense of gratitude. The visit had been more than a simple stop by. It had been a reminder of why he had chosen this life, why he remained connected to the regiment even off duty. The bonds formed here, the lessons learned, and the shared history were treasures that could not be measured in words or actions alone. They were felt in quiet moments, in gestures of guidance and support, and in the deep understanding that every guard was part of a continuing story, one that stretched back centuries and would continue long after they were gone. Finally, as the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the courtyard, James stood and took a last look at the barracks. The horses moved gracefully, the younger guards laughed softly, and the senior officers observed with quiet pride. He felt a profound sense of belonging, knowing that even as he returned to his daily life, a part of him would always remain here, within these walls, among these horses, and with these remarkable people. With a final nod and a smile, he turned and walked away, carrying with him the calm dignity, the discipline, and the shared spirit of the Royal Horse Guards, a spirit that would continue to inspire him in every step of his journey. James had spent the morning and early afternoon reconnecting with his colleagues and observing their routines, but as he walked through the barracks now, he felt an urge to understand more deeply the history and meaning behind the life he had chosen. The Royal Horse Guards were not just a group of men and women in uniform performing ceremonial duties. They were custodians of centuries of tradition. Each polished boot, each carefully maintained horse, each drill and parade carried echoes of the past. James had always admired this history, but today he wanted to experience it more personally, to see how it shaped the lives of those who served within the regiment. He started by visiting the old training hall, a large stone building with high ceilings and walls lined with photographs, awards, and plaques. Each item told a story, an achievement, a moment of pride, or a memory of a significant event. James paused at a photograph of a grand parade held for the coronation of a previous monarch. He studied the image, noting the sharp uniforms, the majestic horses, and the pride in the faces of the guards. "It's incredible," he whispered to himself. "How much dedication and precision it must have taken." As he traced the frame with his fingers, he imagined the sounds and movements of that day, the clatter of hooves on the cobblestones, the crisp commands of officers, the rustle of ceremonial flags in the wind. It was a living history, preserved not only in pictures but in the very spirit of the guards who followed in those footsteps. As James explored, he encountered a senior guard named Edward, who had served in the regiment for more than 20 years. Edward was known for his knowledge of the history of the Horse Guards and his ability to bring stories to life with vivid detail. "Ah, James," Edward said warmly, noticing him, "come here. Let me show you something." He led James to a section of the hall dedicated to the oldest members of the regiment and began recounting tales of their bravery, discipline, and dedication. One story told of a guard who had been entrusted with the safety of a visiting dignitary during a particularly harsh winter, navigating through snow and ice with unwavering focus. Another recounted a ceremonial event where a young horse had panicked before a parade, and the guard's calm presence had restored order, turning potential chaos into a flawless display. James listened intently, absorbing every word. These were not just stories, they were lessons, examples of the qualities that defined a Royal Horse Guard. Edward then motioned toward a set of saddles and harnesses displayed in glass cases. "These are the originals used in some of the earliest ceremonies," he explained. James leaned closer, noting the craftsmanship and care evident in every stitch and buckle. "They remind us that every duty we perform is part of a long chain," Edward continued. "Every guard who comes after us carries a piece of this history with them. That's why attention to detail matters. That's why respect for tradition matters." James felt a sense of awe. The equipment wasn't just functional, it was symbolic, representing the dedication of those who had come before and the responsibility of those who served now. He realized that being a guard was about more than following orders. It was about understanding one's place in a continuing story. After leaving the training hall, James walked toward the parade ground. The area was vast, with neatly trimmed grass and clear boundaries marked for drills. It was where the grandeur of the horse guards came to life during ceremonies, where precision and coordination were tested under the watchful eyes of officers and spectators alike. Today, the ground was quieter, with only a few guards performing light exercises. James observed them, noting how even in casual practice, there was an unspoken standard of excellence. Each movement was deliberate, every gesture purposeful, and the bond between guard and horse was evident in the subtle way they communicated. While standing there, James noticed a young guard struggling with an exercise involving multiple horses. The boy's nervousness was apparent as he tried to guide the animals through precise patterns, his hands shaking slightly. James approached quietly, offering gentle encouragement. "Take a deep breath. Focus on one horse at a time. You'll see it becomes easier when you trust yourself," he advised. The young guard nodded, trying again, this time with more confidence. James stepped back, letting the boy complete the exercise independently. Seeing the young guard succeed brought James a quiet satisfaction. It reminded him that every member of the regiment had once been a learner, that patience and guidance were as important as skill and strength. After the exercises, James wandered to the stables once more, drawn by the familiar comfort of the horses. He paused beside Arthur, the chestnut horse he had ridden countless times. The horse nuzzled his hand, and James stroked its mane gently, feeling the warmth and strength beneath his fingers. He thought about the countless hours he had spent training and performing with Arthur, the trust they had built together, and the unspoken communication that had developed between them. It was a reminder that the bond between guard and horse was fundamental to the role, requiring care, patience, and respect. While tending to the horses, James began talking with another guard, Sarah, who had recently joined the regiment. Sarah spoke of her initial nervousness when she first mounted a ceremonial horse, the challenges of learning to guide such powerful animals, and the pride she felt after completing her first successful parade. James listened attentively, offering advice and encouragement. He shared his own early experiences, the fears he had faced, and the lessons he had learned. Sarah's eyes brightened with understanding, and for a moment, James saw the same spark in her that he had felt in himself years ago, the excitement of becoming part of something larger than oneself. The conversation shifted to the history of the regiment, and James found himself recounting stories he had learned from senior guards and from his own experiences. He spoke of ceremonies attended by kings and dignitaries, of horses that had become legends within the barracks, and of the camaraderie that bound the guards together. The more he spoke, the more he realized how deeply history influenced daily life in the barracks. Each guard carried the past with them, honoring those who had served before while shaping the future for those who would come after. It was a cycle of tradition and mentorship, pride and responsibility, connection and growth. As the afternoon sun began to soften, casting long shadows across the courtyard, James decided to take a quiet walk around the palace grounds. The paths were lined with ancient trees, their leaves whispering in the gentle breeze. The palace itself loomed in the distance, a reminder of the enduring nature of the institution they served. James walked slowly, reflecting on the stories he had heard, the exercises he had observed, and the quiet moments of connection he had shared with his colleagues and the horses. There was a rhythm to this life, a balance between discipline and care, precision and empathy, history and daily practice. During his walk, James encountered a group of guards sitting under a large tree, sharing stories and laughing softly. He joined them, listening as they recounted amusing incidents during past parades, challenges they had overcome, and the lessons learned from both successes and mistakes. James shared a story from his early days in the regiment about a parade where he had nearly lost his balance while riding Arthur. The guards laughed, and James smiled, feeling the warmth of shared experience. It was moments like these that reinforced the sense of community within the regiment, a reminder that even in a role defined by discipline and precision, there was room for joy, camaraderie, and mutual support. As the day drew to a close, James returned to the stables one last time. The horses were calmer now, resting after a day of gentle exercise and attention. James moved among them, stroking their coats, whispering soft words, and feeling the steady strength that radiated from their bodies. He thought about the young guards he had mentored, the stories he had shared, and the lessons he had absorbed from senior officers. Each experience had deepened his understanding of what it meant to be part of the Royal Horse Guards, and he felt a renewed sense of purpose and pride. Finally, as the evening approached and the golden light of the setting sun bathed the barracks in warmth, James stood at the edge of the courtyard. He took a deep breath, feeling the cool air fill his lungs, and looked around at the stables, the horses, and the guards who had become more than colleagues. They were friends, mentors, and companions in a shared journey. The day had been filled with quiet reflection, meaningful interaction, and a deeper appreciation for the history and community that defined the Royal Horse Guards. James felt a profound gratitude for being part of this world, even off duty, and for the opportunity to witness and contribute to the continuing story of the regiment. With a final nod and a quiet smile, James turned and walked toward the gates, carrying with him the lessons, stories, and connections of the day. The barracks and horses, the laughter and guidance, the history and camaraderie, they were all part of him now, woven into the fabric of his life as a Royal Horse Guard. As he passed through the gates, he felt a renewed sense of belonging and purpose, ready to face whatever challenges and joys awaited him, knowing that the legacy and spirit of the regiment would always be with him. As James continued to walk through the quiet streets outside the palace, his thoughts lingered on the day he had spent reconnecting with his colleagues. Yet a part of him felt drawn to return, to spend a little more time within the barracks, not merely as a visitor, but as a guide, someone who could share his experiences and help others grow. The Royal Horse Guards were more than a regiment. They were a living community, and James realized that being part of this community extended beyond formal duties. Today, he wanted to give back, to help the younger guards learn from the lessons he had accumulated over the years. He returned to the stables, where a few young guards were preparing the horses for afternoon exercises. Their movements were careful but tentative, reflecting the uncertainty that came with new responsibilities. James approached a group of them who were struggling to coordinate a practice session with multiple horses. "Take it one step at a time," he advised gently, "and don't be afraid to ask for help. Trust comes with patience, not rush." The young guards looked up, relief and curiosity mingling in their expressions. James guided them through the correct handling of the horses, demonstrating how to maintain calm, steady movements while giving clear commands. The horses responded to his presence with quiet acceptance, reinforcing the bond between experience and trust. Watching the young guards gain confidence under his guidance, James reflected on his own early days in the regiment. He remembered the nervous excitement he had felt when first mounting Arthur, the chestnut horse who had become his companion and teacher. At that moment, he understood that mentorship was as crucial to the Royal Horse Guards as discipline and ceremony. Without guidance, the young guards would struggle. With it, they could grow into capable and confident members of the regiment, ready to carry forward its traditions. He moved between the guards, offering encouragement, adjusting grips, and sharing small tips he had learned through years of practice. Each smile and nod from the young riders felt like a small victory, a sign that the lessons he shared were taking root. Once the horses were settled and the young guards more confident, James turned his attention to the parade ground. It was a wide, open space where precision and coordination were honed. Today, a few guards were practicing intricate maneuvers, testing both their skills and the trust between rider and horse. James observed silently at first, noting small errors and moments of hesitation. Then he approached, offering constructive advice in a calm, measured tone. "Focus on your posture," he said to one guard, "and remember, the horse responds to your confidence. Move with certainty, not hesitation." The advice seemed to help immediately. The guard adjusted his stance and guided the horse with smoother movements, his confidence growing with each step. As the afternoon progressed, James found himself drawn into a conversation with a guard named Emily, who had recently joined the regiment. She spoke of the challenges she had faced while learning to ride ceremonial horses, the fear of making mistakes in front of senior officers, and the pride she felt after completing her first successful parade. James listened carefully, offering encouragement and sharing similar experiences from his own early days. "Every mistake is a lesson," he told her. "Even the most experienced guard learns something new every day. Don't be afraid to trust yourself and the horse." Emily nodded, her eyes bright with understanding and newfound confidence. It was a reminder to James that teaching was as much about listening as it was about instructing. During a break, James walked to the stables again to check on Arthur. The horse was calm, resting after a gentle exercise, yet alert, ears flicking toward James as he approached. He ran his hand along Arthur's neck, feeling the familiar warmth and strength beneath his fingers. "You've been patient with me, old friend," James murmured, "and today you've helped others learn too." The bond between them was quiet but profound, built on years of shared experiences, trust, and mutual respect. He realized that every guard in the regiment had a similar connection with their horses, a relationship that shaped their daily lives and their sense of purpose. As James continued to mentor the younger guards, he observed the impact of guidance and encouragement firsthand. One young guard, previously hesitant, now moved with confidence, handling the horse with steady hands and clear commands. Another began to correct a minor error in the routine without prompting, showing that he had internalized the lessons James had shared. These small successes were significant. They demonstrated the ripple effect of patience, mentorship, and example. James felt a quiet pride, knowing that his presence, even for a few hours, had contributed to the growth and confidence of the next generation of Royal Horse Guards. Later, James moved to the mess hall, where a few guards were sharing tea and conversation. The atmosphere was relaxed, filled with laughter and camaraderie. James joined them, and soon the conversation turned to stories of memorable ceremonies and personal experiences within the regiment. One guard spoke of a parade in pouring rain, the challenges of maintaining composure while ensuring the horses remained calm. Another recounted the pride of escorting a visiting dignitary, the honor of representing the regiment with discipline and precision. James shared his own reflections, emphasizing the importance of patience, preparation, and teamwork. The young guards listened intently, absorbing lessons that went beyond technical skills, lessons about resilience, focus, and the dignity of service. As the afternoon wore on, James noticed a guard struggling with a difficult maneuver involving multiple horses. The boy's frustration was clear, his shoulders tense and his hands shaking slightly. James approached calmly, kneeling beside the boy to demonstrate the technique step by step. "Breathe," he said softly. "Control yourself first, then guide the horse. Patience is everything." The young guard followed his instructions, and with each attempt his movements became smoother, his confidence growing. When the maneuver was finally executed successfully, the boy's eyes shone with pride. James smiled, feeling the quiet satisfaction that came from seeing someone learn and succeed. It was in these moments, small but significant, that the true spirit of the Royal Horse Guards revealed itself, a commitment not only to duty and tradition, but also to nurturing growth and confidence in others. As the sun began to descend, casting long golden shadows across the courtyard and stables, James paused for a moment to reflect. He thought about the young guards he had mentored, the stories shared in the mess hall, and the quiet moments of connection with the horses. Each interaction had strengthened his understanding of what it meant to serve as a royal horse guard. It was not just about ceremonial duties or perfect drills. It was about trust, mentorship, history, and community. Every guard, every horse, and every moment contributed to the living legacy of the regiment. Before leaving for the evening, James walked slowly among the stables, greeting each horse and guard. The air was calm, filled with the quiet sounds of contented horses and relaxed guards. He thought about the lessons of the day, the growth he had witnessed, and the pride that came from being part of a community dedicated to excellence and tradition. The bonds of mentorship and friendship, the trust between guard and horse, and the respect for history all came together to form a tapestry of purpose and meaning. James felt grateful for the opportunity to contribute, even briefly, to this continuing story. Finally, as twilight settled over the barracks, James stood at the edge of the courtyard, looking out over the stables and the parade ground. The horses moved gracefully in the fading light, and the guards shared quiet moments of camaraderie. James took a deep breath, feeling a sense of fulfillment and peace. The day had been full of teaching, reflection, and connection, reminding him that being part of the Royal Horse Guards was not only a matter of duty, but also of heart, patience, and shared history. With a final nod to his colleagues and a gentle pat on Arthur's neck, James turned toward the gates, ready to return to his personal life for the evening. Yet he carried with him the lessons, the connections, and the quiet pride of the day, a day that had deepened his understanding of the Royal Horse Guards and strengthened his commitment to their values. As he walked away, the sounds of the barracks, the soft nickers of horses, the gentle laughter of guards, the distant echo of hooves, followed him, a comforting reminder of the life he loved and the legacy he was part of. As the evening settled over the palace grounds, James walked slowly toward the outer gates, the soft light of the setting sun casting long shadows across the cobblestone courtyard. The day had been long, filled with quiet observation, mentoring, and reflection, and yet he felt an unusual energy stirring within him, a sense of completeness that came from giving and receiving in equal measure. He had returned to the barracks not just to visit, but to reconnect with the essence of what it meant to be a Royal Horse Guard. Every step he took now carried with it the memory of conversations, the lessons shared, and the trust earned in subtle ways over the course of the day. He paused for a moment at the center of the courtyard, watching the last few guards finishing their routines. The horses moved calmly under their care, responding to gentle commands and precise guidance. It was a rhythm James had known for years, yet seeing it unfold with both seasoned and younger guards reminded him of the continuity of tradition. Each action, each gesture, and each decision made in those moments contributed to the living legacy of the regiment. James felt a deep sense of pride, knowing that he was part of this history, not merely as a participant, but as someone who had the opportunity to shape it through guidance and example. Walking toward the stables, James encountered Thomas and Emily, two of the younger guards he had worked with earlier. Their faces brightened as they saw him approaching. "James, we were just talking about the exercises you helped us with," Thomas said, his voice filled with excitement. Emily nodded eagerly. "I feel like I understand so much more now," she added. "Thank you for taking the time to teach us." James smiled warmly. "You've done all the work," he said. "I just reminded you of what you already knew deep down." Confidence grows with practice and patience, and you've shown both today. Their expressions reflected a mixture of pride, relief, and gratitude, and James felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that his efforts had made a difference. He moved among the stables, greeting each horse as if checking in with old friends. Arthur, the chestnut horse who had been his companion for years, nuzzled his hand as James stroked his neck. The horse's warm, steady presence was comforting, a reminder that the bond between guard and horse was one of trust, patience, and understanding. James thought about the many ceremonies and parades they had shared, the countless hours of training, and the silent conversations that passed between them through gestures, movements, and eye contact. In that quiet moment, he felt a profound connection, not just with Arthur, but with the entire lineage of horses and guards that had carried the regiment through generations. James's thoughts turned to the lessons of the day. Mentoring the young guards had reminded him of the importance of guidance, patience, and support. Listening to their experiences had deepened his appreciation for the courage it took to learn new skills under pressure, and witnessing their successes had filled him with a quiet pride. The Royal Horse Guards were more than a ceremonial regiment. They were a community built on trust, history, and shared purpose. Every guard, every horse, and every moment contributed to this tapestry of discipline, mentorship, and connection. As twilight deepened, James walked toward the mess hall, drawn by the gentle murmur of conversation and laughter. The room was warm, filled with the comforting scents of tea, bread, and polished wood. Guards sat together, sharing stories and reflecting on the day's experiences. James joined them, and soon the conversation turned to reflections on tradition and the importance of carrying the legacy of the regiment forward. A senior officer spoke of the ceremonies attended by kings and dignitaries, emphasizing the role of each guard in upholding the honor and dignity of the regiment. James listened attentively, feeling the weight of responsibility alongside the pride of belonging. A younger guard asked James what motivated him to remain committed to the regiment after so many years. James paused, considering his answer carefully. "It's the history, the discipline, and the relationships," he said finally. "But most importantly, it's the people, the horses, the guards, the mentors who have guided me, and the young guards who inspire me every day. Being a part of this community is a privilege, and that privilege comes with responsibility. It's not just about performing duties. It's about preserving a legacy and supporting one another in ways that aren't always visible to the public." His words were met with thoughtful nods, and he realized that the young guards were beginning to understand what it truly meant to serve. After a period of quiet conversation, James decided to take one final walk around the barracks. The evening air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of hay and leather from the stables. The courtyard was peaceful now, the sounds of hooves and laughter fading into a soft background hum. He reflected on the stories he had heard from senior guards, the guidance he had offered to younger members, and the quiet moments of connection he had shared with the horses. Each experience had reinforced the idea that being a Royal Horse Guard was not simply a role. It was a way of life, a commitment to excellence, discipline, and community. James paused at the gates, looking back at the barracks one last time. The stone walls, the neatly arranged stables, and the parade ground all seemed to glow in the soft light of dusk. He felt a deep sense of gratitude for being part of this world, for the lessons learned, the relationships formed, and the history he was entrusted to carry forward. Though he would return to his personal life outside the regiment, a part of him would always remain here, among the horses, the guards, and the legacy of the Royal Horse Guards. As he walked away from the gates, James reflected on the subtle yet profound ways the regiment shaped its members. It was not just the ceremonies or the drills that mattered. It was the culture of mentorship, the respect for history, and the bonds of trust between guards and horses. Each act of guidance, each shared story, and each quiet moment of observation contributed to the strength and continuity of the regiment. James felt humbled and inspired, knowing that he had been both a student and a teacher within this community, and that the lessons of today would continue to ripple through the lives of those he had mentored. The streets outside the palace were quieter now, the bustle of the city replaced by the gentle sounds of evening. James walked slowly, savoring the calm and reflecting on the fullness of the day. He thought about the young guards, their progress and confidence, the senior officers and their wisdom, and the horses, whose trust and presence had been a constant source of grounding and reassurance. Every interaction, every story, and every moment had contributed to a deeper understanding of what it meant to serve with honor and dedication. As he reached a quiet park near the palace, James paused again, looking up at the sky, painted with shades of pink, orange, and purple as the sun disappeared beyond the horizon. He felt a sense of completion, a quiet fulfillment that came from giving guidance, witnessing growth, and reconnecting with the living history of the Royal Horse Guards. He realized that the bonds formed through service, mentorship, and shared experience were enduring, shaping not only the present but also the future of the regiment. James thought about the young guards he had mentored and the lessons they had learned, realizing that they would carry those lessons forward, influencing others in turn. The cycle of guidance, learning, and growth was continuous, and he felt proud to be part of it. Likewise, the wisdom he had received from senior guards over the years had shaped his own journey, reminding him of the value of patience, dedication, and respect. It was a chain of influence and connection that extended far beyond any single day or single individual. As night began to settle over the city, James finally turned toward home. The quiet streets, lit by the soft glow of lanterns, felt calm and reassuring. He carried with him the lessons, the stories, and the quiet pride of the day. A day spent mentoring, observing, and reflecting on the enduring legacy of the Royal Horse Guards. Though the barracks and the horses were now behind him, the spirit of the regiment traveled with him, a steady presence guiding his steps. Finally, as James reached his own doorstep, he paused, taking a deep breath. The day had been long and filled with learning, teaching, and reflection. Yet he felt renewed, inspired by the connections he had strengthened and the legacy he had helped uphold. Being a Royal Horse Guard was more than a profession. It was a way of life, a commitment to history, discipline, mentorship, and community. With a quiet smile, he stepped inside, carrying the pride and dignity of the regiment into the next chapter of his life, knowing that the bonds of friendship, trust, and tradition would remain with him always.